What would you do if your parents asked you to get a DNA test for your daughter, who has different hair and eye color from the entire family line, before giving her a $5,000 Christmas gift? I went through that. My parents demanded it right in the middle of Christmas dinner, in front of the entire extended family, and in front of my own 9-year-old daughter. Right after that, my grandma, an 84-year-old woman the whole family had always respected, stood up and revealed a 55-year secret that my dad had been hiding. A secret that even my mom, who'd been living with him for almost 30 years, had never known about. Before I get into the details of the story, let me say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Hello everyone, I'm Derek, a 32-year-old architect in Denver. My story happened last Christmas, the day every kid excitedly waits for Santa, anticipating the secret gifts under the Christmas tree. But for my daughter, that day became a memory I wish I could erase from her mind. My wife Rachel, 30 at the time, is a freelance graphic designer. She chose to work from home so she could pick Mia up from school every day. We live in a small apartment on Capitol Hill, about 10 minutes from downtown Denver. Not wealthy, but warm enough for a family of 3. My daughter Mia was just 9 years old then. She's intelligent, sensitive, and has one trait that makes her stand out in the entire Thompson family line: copper-red hair and green eyes. Everyone in my family has brown hair and brown eyes. Mia's completely different. Rachel explained that she inherited the genes from her Irish grandma. But for some people in my family, that difference became an excuse for them to whisper behind our backs. They never said it directly, but eyes don't know how to lie. And what worried me most was that Mia was old enough to understand. At 9 years old, she could hear and understand everything. She didn't know how to react. Every year, the entire extended family gathers at my parents' house in Colorado Springs for Christmas dinner, about an hour-and-a-half drive down I-25 from Denver. At last year's Christmas party, my parents announced the party would be more special than ever. They'd be giving out college funds for each grandchild. Sounds like a nice gesture, right? I thought so too. Rachel thought so too. Mia was even excited enough to draw a thank you card for Grandma and Grandpa before we got in the car. We walked into the house at 11 a.m. on Christmas Day, and I had no idea that just a few hours later, my family would never be the same again. Christmas lunch started pretty cheerfully, at least on the surface. Mom prepared a whole feast. Mia sat next to Austin and Haley, my brother Brandon's 2 kids. The 3 kids were laughing and joking, competing to tell each other about the gifts they'd just opened that morning. She bragged to her 2 cousins that Mom and Dad gave her a 72-piece art set, her eyes bright as she talked about the pictures she was going to paint. Watching the 3 kids snuggle together, I quietly thought maybe this year would be a peaceful Christmas. But I was wrong. After lunch, Dad tapped his spoon against his wine glass, signaling everyone to gather in the living room. Dad's the type of person that when he speaks, the whole family has to listen. He stood in the middle of the room, then spoke formally. Today is a special day. Mom and I want to give you kids a meaningful gift, a $5,000 college fund for each one. Mom stood next to Dad, holding 3 thick envelopes and placing them formally on the coffee table. She nodded with satisfaction, then called Austin up first. The 7-year-old ran up, face beaming. Dad handed over the envelope, patted his head, and told him, "Austin, my smart grandson, when you grow up, you're gonna do great things." Next was Haley, just 4 years old. She still didn't understand what was happening, but she just knew to run up and hug Grandpa. Dad kissed her forehead, voice sweet. "Here's our little princess." Tiffany, Brandon's wife, sat below with a bright smile, and my brother nodded in satisfaction, clapping softly. I glanced at Mia. She sat up straight, eyes lighting up with excitement, hands gripping the edge of the red dress she'd picked out a week ago to wear to see Grandma and Grandpa. She leaned toward me, whispering, "Dad, it's almost my turn, right?" I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Rachel sat next to us, also looking at Mia with gentle eyes. But then Dad picked up the 3rd envelope, and instead of calling Mia up, he set it back down on the table. His eyes went cold, his gaze shifting from warm to distant in an instant. As if understanding his meaning, Mom cleared her throat, looked at Mia, and spoke with a forced smile. "Mia, before we give this fund, Grandma and Grandpa need to make sure of one thing." I frowned when Mom finished speaking, sensing something wasn't right. Rachel also sat up straighter, gripping Mia's hand. Dad continued after Mom, his voice hard as steel. We need a DNA test first, to make sure Mia is really our granddaughter. I thought I heard wrong. My whole body felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on me. I shot up, looking straight into Dad's eyes, voice shaking as I tried to hold back. What did you just say? Dad didn't flinch at all. He looked back at me and answered, look at the kid. Red hair, green eyes. Nobody in the Thompson family has those features. $5,000 isn't chump change. We need to know for sure the money's going to the right place. Rachel jumped up after me, one hand still gripping Mia's hand tightly. She looked at my parents, voice choking. What are you saying? Right in front of her? Right then, Uncle Wesley, Dad's 48-year-old younger brother, also shot up. He's a high school teacher who has never been married. Uncle Wesley looked at Dad with disbelief, then said firmly, Raymond, what the hell did you say? This is your granddaughter. Dad whipped around to face him, voice ice cold. Wesley, this is my family business. You don't have a wife or kids. What do you understand? But Uncle Wesley didn't back down. He stepped forward, voice louder. You're saying these things in front of a 9-year-old girl. She's hearing everything. She understands everything. Do you know what you're doing? Dad waved his hand, shouting back. I told you to sit down. This isn't your business. And me? I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice calm even though I was boiling inside. Dad, Mia is my daughter. What's there to doubt about that? Dad looked at me, then glanced at Mia, his eyes full of suspicion as he replied. Are you sure? Look at her. Does she look like you at all? At that moment, Rachel squeezed Mia's hand tighter. She looked straight at my parents' faces, voice shaking with anger. Enough. We don't need to hear any more. But my parents still weren't done. And Brandon and Tiffany just sat there, not moving a muscle, like this had nothing to do with them. Then Tiffany leaned over to her husband, whispering but loud enough for the whole room to hear. Maybe just split that portion between Austin and Haley, honey. It's fair. Since we're not sure anyway. That comment was like a knife cutting into my chest. I turned to look at Mia. The excited smile on her lips had disappeared long ago. Her green eyes were wide, welling up with tears, lips trembling. And 9 years old, she understood that Grandma and Grandpa were doubting whether she was really their granddaughter, that Aunt Tiffany wanted to take her gift away, and that Uncle Brandon didn't say a word to defend her. She clung to Rachel's hand, voice tiny and trembling. Mom, did I do something wrong? In that moment, I saw something in my daughter's eyes shatter. The way she shrank into herself. The way she hung her head like she wanted to disappear from this room. In the corner of the room, my Grandma Gloria still sat silent. She hadn't said a word since the party started, but I noticed her eyes were staring straight at Dad, ice cold. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair tightly, probably holding herself back. I didn't pay much attention then, but thinking back later, maybe she'd decided a lot of things in that silent moment. The whole room seemed frozen. I stood there, gripping the back of the chair, trying to hold back the rage rising to my throat. Rachel held Mia close, her eyes red and puffy. And before we could decide what to do next, Mom opened her mouth and said something else that made my blood boil to the breaking point. Mom leaned forward, then spoke sweetly, but each word sharp as a knife. We don't mean anything bad. But Rachel had that thing with her coworker back then. The whole town knows. How can we trust? We need proof. I stood frozen, not believing my ears. My mom had just implied my wife cheated, right in front of our daughter. Hearing my mom say that, Tiffany didn't miss the opportunity. She turned to Brandon, nodded, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear. Mom's got a point. Better safe than sorry. At that moment, I turned to look at Mia. She was biting her lip hard, trying not to cry. The moment I saw my daughter like that, something inside me changed. It wasn't uncontrolled rage. It was something colder, calmer. Like when you realize someone isn't worth your emotions anymore. Then I laughed. A bitter laugh rang out in the silent room, making everyone jump and look at me. After the laugh, I looked up straight into my parents' eyes, then spoke calmly. $5,000? You want to do a DNA test on my daughter for $5,000? Dad was about to open his mouth, but I held up my hand to stop him and continued. Let me tell you something. Since the day Mia was born, My wife and I have been saving a little each month. Some months, Rachel took on extra projects, working nights. In other months, I lost sleep taking on extra work to save money. 9 whole years. I paused for a beat, stepped forward to stand between Mia and my parents, then continued, we've built a $30,000 fund for her. 30,000. 6 times the amount you're using to humiliate my daughter. Hearing this, Tiffany's face went pale. And Brandon just hung his head, staring at the floor, not daring to look at anyone. Seeing my brother and sister-in-law go silent, I turned back to my parents and said directly, Mia doesn't need your $5,000. Especially not if the price is being humiliated in front of the whole family. Hearing me say that, Dad shot up, face red with anger. He pointed his finger at my face and roared, how dare you talk to your parents like that? I didn't back down one step, looked straight into his eyes, and replied, I do dare. Because you just told your granddaughter that she might not be a blood relative. In front of her cousins. After confronting Dad, I turned to Mom and asked directly, and about Rachel's coworker that you just mentioned, I know all about it. Rachel told me that very night. A guy sent her flirty texts, and she blocked him the same day. So who was it that spread the story around the whole town? Hearing my question, Mom went pale. She opened her mouth but couldn't get a word out. The room fell into heavy silence. While no one was saying anything, in the corner of the room, I caught a glimpse of Grandma quietly pulling out her phone, typing something, then putting it back in her pocket. However, I didn't pay much attention because I was still preoccupied with other things. I turned back to Mia, sat down at her eye level and took her 2 tiny, trembling hands. Looking into her tear-filled green eyes, I said slowly, Mia, listen to me. You are my daughter. That will never change. No one has the right to say otherwise. Hearing me say that, she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. After comforting my daughter, I stood up, took Rachel's hand, and planned to tell her we were leaving. But my wife did something that, in my family, no one could have expected. Rachel stood up, and I saw something I'd never seen in 10 years of knowing her. Eyes blazing, nothing left to lose, nothing left to fear. I knew my wife had endured long enough. And that day, the last straw had broken. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was cold as steel when she looked straight at my mom's face and asked, the thing with my coworker? You just said the thing with my coworker? Mom was about to open her mouth, but Rachel continued. For almost 10 years, I've been part of this family and tried to be a good daughter-in-law. For almost 10 years, I've swallowed my tears every time I left this house. She stepped forward, eyes never leaving my mom as she asked, do you remember my first Christmas here? I brought apple pie, my grandma's recipe, baked since 5 a.m. You took one bite and said, I guess you're not used to cooking. It's too different from our family's taste. Then you pushed the plate to the corner of the table, left it there until I took it away, and threw it out myself. Hearing this, I felt my chest tighten. Rachel had never shared the story with me. Mom stammered to explain, but Rachel didn't give her the chance. Rachel took a deep breath, her voice starting to shake as she continued. But all of that, I could handle. What I can't handle is the way you people treat my daughter. She turned to look at Mia sitting huddled on the chair next to me, tears streaming down, then turned back to face my parents. Mia's birthday last year, do you remember? No, you don't remember because you completely forgot. Not one phone call, not one card. But Austin and Haley's birthdays? Restaurant parties, 3-tier cakes, the whole family invited. Hearing this, Tiffany hung her head, not daring to look at anyone. Rachel wasn't done. She pointed at the Christmas tree in the corner. Last Christmas, right in this room, Austin got a $200 remote control car. Haley got a $150 American Girl doll. And Mia? You gave her a $5 box of crayons from Dollar Tree. Still had the price tag on it. Hearing this, my heart felt like someone was crushing it. Then Rachel turned to Tiffany, her voice ice cold. And you just suggested taking my daughter's share and splitting it between your kids. You sat there, watched a 9-year-old get humiliated by her own grandparents, and all you thought about was money. Do you have any humanity left? Being confronted, Tiffany hung her head low, hands twisting together, not daring to say a word back. Rachel turned back to look at my parents, her voice choking. Do you know what she said to me after last Christmas? She asked, Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa like me? Did I do something wrong? 8 years old. She was 8 years old. And she already knew she was being treated differently. She didn't understand why. The whole room went dead silent. No one dared to move. But that wasn't all. Rachel took a deep breath, then continued, her voice trembling. You people look at my daughter like she's evidence of a crime that needs verification. You don't see a good, smart, kind child. You only see her hair color and eye color. After saying that, she knelt next to Mia and held her close. Mia sobbed, burying her face in Mom's shoulder. Rachel stroked her hair, voice gentle but loud enough for the whole room to hear. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Never. This isn't your fault. Hearing Mom say this, Mia looked up, green eyes red and swollen, voice choked. Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa really hate me because I'm different? That question was like a knife stabbed straight into my heart. I saw Rachel hold her tighter, her tears starting to fall too. In the corner of the room, Grandma Gloria had been sitting silent the whole time. But I noticed her eyes were watching the scene before her with an unreadable expression. Not indifference, not judgment, like she was waiting for something. I stepped forward, put my hand on Rachel's shoulder, and said, let's go home. But right then the doorbell rang, and Grandma, who hadn't said a word the entire party, slowly stood up from her armchair. Uncle Wesley opened the door and froze. In front of him was a middle-aged man in a black suit, carrying a leather briefcase, standing on the porch in the winter cold. His shoulders were dusted with a thin layer of snow. Seeing Uncle Wesley say nothing, the man stepped inside, brushed the snow off his shoulders, and nodded to greet the whole room. No one understood what was happening. Seeing the stranger appear, Dad frowned, voice full of irritation as he asked Uncle Wesley, "Who's this? In the middle of Christmas dinner, who invited this person?" Uncle Wesley shook his head. He didn't know either. Right then, from the corner of the room, Grandma slowly stood up. She's 84 years old, back already hunched. But when she stood up, the whole room seemed to shrink. Her voice rang out, not loud but clear. Every word, I invited him. This is my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Hearing Grandma say that, the whole room went silent. I saw Dad's face go pale, and Mom just stood frozen. In the silence, Grandma walked to the middle of the room, slowly but surely. She looked straight into Dad's eyes and continued, I texted Mr. Harrison right when you opened your mouth demanding a DNA test. Raymond, he's right in Manitou Springs, 10 minutes drive away. Hearing this, Dad stammered, voice trembling, Mom, what are you doing? I don't understand. Grandma held up her hand to stop him. Then she turned to look around the room at each person one by one. Her eyes stopped at Brandon and Tiffany, then at my mom, finally turning back to Dad. After looking around, she spoke, slowly but each word like a hammer blow. I sat here the whole party. I witnessed everything. I heard it all, saw it all. She paused here, took a deep breath, then continued. I waited. I waited to see if any of you would wake up, if anyone would stand up and say something fair. Then she turned to Uncle Wesley, voice softening slightly. Wesley was the only one who spoke up. My youngest son, the one his brother just yelled at for having no wife or kids. What do you understand? But he was the only one who still knew right from wrong. After speaking to Uncle Wesley, she turned to Brandon. I was going cold. And you, Brandon, your niece got humiliated by her own grandparents right in front of you. And you sat there without saying a word, silent like it had nothing to do with you. Being called out by Grandma, Brandon hung his head low, not daring to look at her. Grandma wasn't done. She turned to Tiffany. And you, Tiffany, you even suggested taking Mia's share and splitting it between your kids. A 9-year-old crying right in front of you, and all you thought about was money. Hearing Grandma scold her, Tiffany went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but Grandma had already turned away. After calling out each person, she signaled to Lawyer Harrison. He stepped forward, placed his leather briefcase on the coffee table, right next to the 3 college fund envelopes still lying there. Grandma looked down at the briefcase for a moment, then looked up and said to the whole room, I'm 84 years old. I don't know how many more winters I have left to breathe. Could be 10 years or 10 days. Only God knows. She paused here, voice dropping. I was planning to wait until after dinner to talk about the will. Planning to make it nice, proper, like a family. But after what I just witnessed, She shook her head, then continued with a firm voice. Right now is the most appropriate time. Hearing this, Dad shot up, voice panicked. Mom, what are you doing? Grandma turned to look at Dad, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Her eyes so cold that Dad stepped back. He's a 55-year-old man, tall and always acting as if he's in charge. But before her, he was like a child caught doing something wrong. Facing her son, Grandma spoke slowly but with full authority. Sit down, Raymond. Hearing his mother's command, Dad sat down immediately, as if someone had just pressed his shoulders down. Then she continued, voice dropping. I have something to tell you. Something you should have told your wife and kids long ago. But you didn't say it. You chose to hide it. So today I'll say it for you. Hearing Grandma say this, Mom looked back and forth between her and Dad in panic, then asked with a trembling voice, What thing? What are you hiding from me? Raymond, tell me. Dad didn't answer. He sat there, eyes looking down at the floor, hands gripping his knees tightly. While my parents were tense, I looked at Brandon and Tiffany. For the first time that party, both of them no longer looked smug or calculating. They looked at each other, faces full of worry, like they could sense the storm about to hit. The air in the room was thick, heavy. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the fire crackling in the fireplace, and Dad's labored breathing. And what she said next made everything I knew about this family collapse completely. She looked straight into Dad's eyes, took a deep breath, then spoke. Raymond, you demanded a DNA test for Mia because she doesn't look like Derek. You said she doesn't have our family's features. You said we need to be sure before giving her $5,000. Hearing her repeat this, Dad nodded stiffly, then replied, trying to sound firm. I'm just protecting the family's interests. Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. Hearing that answer, Grandma laughed, but the laugh had no joy in it. It was cold, dry, and scarier than any yelling could be. After that laugh, she spoke calmly. Family interests. All right, so let me ask you this. Raymond, almost 55 years ago, when I carried you home from St. Mary's Orphanage in Colorado Springs, did you have our family's features? Hearing her question, the whole room went dead silent, and Dad went pale as a ghost. His lips trembling, he stammered back. Mom, what are you saying? Why would you? Grandma didn't let him finish. She cut him off, voice still calm. You're adopted, Raymond. You don't have one drop of my blood. Not one drop. Hearing Grandma's declaration, Mom's jaw dropped, face white as a sheet. She looked at Dad, then at Grandma, then back at Dad. In the stunned silence of the room, Grandma continued, voice dropping. I took you when you were just 3 months old. One rainy November night, someone left you in a wicker basket at the gate of St. Mary's Church. No letter, no name, just a blue wool blanket wrapped around you. She paused here, took a breath, then continued. I don't know who your birth parents were. I don't have any DNA to test. I know that night, when I saw you in that basket, you looked back at me with those big, round eyes, and I knew you were my son. After a moment of silence, she looked at Dad, voice gentler but still heavy. I raised you, took care of your schooling. I sold my only car to pay for your college tuition. I gave you money for the down payment on your first house when you got married. I gave you everything I had. She paused, then emphasized, and I never once asked if you deserved it. I never demanded you prove you were my son. I just loved you, unconditionally. Hearing this, my eyes stung. Next to me, Rachel squeezed Mia's hand tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. Right then, Mom suddenly turned to Dad, voice hoarse from shock and anger. You hid this from me? For over 30 years. I've been your wife, and you never told me a word? Dad still sat there, eyes glued to the floor, not answering. Seeing Dad's silence, Brandon spoke up, voice shaking. Dad's adopted? So what am I? What is our family? Hearing my brother ask, Grandma turned to him, voice softening. You're still my grandson, Brandon. Blood doesn't define family. Love defines family. Then she turned back to look at Dad, voice hardening. But your father doesn't understand that, even though he himself is living proof. Then she continued, voice full of bitterness. I told you the truth when you turned 18, Raymond. You know it well, but you chose to hide it. You were ashamed of being adopted. You hid it from your wife, your kids, the whole world, for almost 30 years. Hearing Grandma finish, Uncle Wesley, standing nearby, shook his head. He looked at Dad, then spoke sadly. I always thought you'd tell them yourself, Raymond. I thought you'd have the courage someday. But you never did. I stood there, feet like nails hammered to the floor. My head is spinning. And I realized, the person who was loved unconditionally despite not sharing blood was demanding a DNA test from his own 9-year-old granddaughter. In that moment, Dad looked up and opened his mouth to say something. But Grandma held up her hand, stopping him. Grandma turned to Lawyer Harrison, nodded to signal him. He opened his briefcase, took out a stack of papers and a pen, and was ready to take notes. Then she looked around the room once, spoke. I already had a will. In it, I divided my assets equally among my children and grandchildren. Fair, decent, like a mother should do. She paused, took a deep breath. The whole room held its breath waiting. Then she continued, but after what I witnessed today, I'm changing my decision. Right now, in front of my lawyer. Hearing this, I saw Dad go pale, and Mom gripped the armrest of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Grandma turned to Lawyer Harrison, then began reading each item one by one. The vacation home in Aspen, Colorado, worth approximately $1.2 million, was left to Mia, which was transferred into a trust fund managed by Rachel and me until she turns 25. Hearing my name and my daughter's name, I was stunned. Rachel squeezed my hand tight. She couldn't believe her ears either. Grandma continued with the second item. $450,000 in savings is split into 2 parts. Half to Uncle Wesley, the person she called the only one tonight who dared to stand up and say what's right. The other half she donated to a charity protecting children from psychological abuse. In Colorado. Hearing this, Tiffany shot up, asking what about Austin and Haley. Grandma just looked at her once, then answered curtly, I already said it. You don't need to ask again. Tiffany went pale, stepped back, not daring to say more. In the tension, Dad shot up. He pressed her. What about him? He's her son. His voice was desperate, like an abandoned child. Grandma turned to look at Dad, and this time her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were sad. So sad. I felt my heart tighten. She spoke slowly. You are my son, Raymond. I love you. That will never change. But she didn't stop at those loving words. She continued, voice dropping but every word clear. But today you showed me you're willing to hurt a child over $5,000. You were loved your whole life unconditionally, even though you're not my blood. But you couldn't love Mia just because her hair's a different color. Dad stood there, face pale, and couldn't say a word. Mom wouldn't stay quiet. She stepped forward, voice hoarse, threatening to sue because Grandma's old, no longer competent. Lawyer Harrison calmly replied. He said he'd arrange for 2 independent doctors to evaluate Gloria's capacity before notarization. And based on tonight's conversation, he could testify that she was completely lucid, fully aware of all her decisions. Mom stood frozen, couldn't get another word out. While the adults were tense, Grandma slowly turned to Mia. She was still nestled against Rachel, eyes red and swollen, not understanding what was happening. Grandma slowly walked over, then knelt in front of her great-granddaughter. At the child's eye level, she reached out to stroke her red hair, then said gently, Mia, great-grandma's sorry for what you had to hear today. No child should have to go through that. She looked at great-grandma, lips trembling. Grandma continued, voice warm. You are my great-granddaughter. Your red hair is beautiful. Your green eyes shine like emeralds. You belong to this family. No one has the right to say otherwise. Hearing Grandma say this, Mia burst into tears. She threw herself into a tight hug, sobbing and asking if great-grandma hated her, if great-grandma still loved her. Grandma held her tight, voice trembling. Never, sweetheart. Great-grandma loves you. Always. That will never change. I stood there, watching my 84-year-old grandma kneeling on the floor holding my 9-year-old great-granddaughter, and tears just streamed down my cheeks. We left the house that very afternoon. Mia slept in the car, head resting on Rachel's shoulder, hands still gripping Mom's tight. I drove back to Denver in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror. My parents' house got smaller and smaller, then disappeared completely around the bend. I wondered if I'd ever walk through that door again. And just as Grandma had declared that Christmas night, Everything was carried out precisely as she said. After we left, she returned to Manitou Springs and finalized the new will with lawyer Harrison. 2 independent doctors confirmed she was thoroughly competent. All procedures were notarized correctly. No one could contest it. As for my parents, the people who prioritized money over family bonds, they had to pay the price for their own words and actions. Uncle Wesley told me that after that night, Mom couldn't forgive Dad for hiding the adoption for almost 30 years of marriage. The 2 of them had serious problems. The house that was once full of laughter now only had cold silence. My brother's family fell apart differently. Tiffany spent all day nagging Brandon for losing the inheritance. She blamed her husband for not speaking up, for not standing with his parents more strongly. I heard the 2 of them are talking about separation. Mia gradually recovered. She still occasionally asks me why Grandma and Grandpa don't call anymore. I didn't know how to answer, so I just said that sometimes adults need time to learn how to love appropriately. She nodded, didn't ask more, but I know she was still sad. As for Uncle Wesley, he's still the person I respect most on Dad's side. Even though he received $225,000 from Grandma, he quietly set up a small scholarship fund for orphan children in Colorado Springs. He told me money can't buy peace, but it can help unlucky kids have more opportunities. About Grandma, after hearing about the will, I called to refuse it. I told her we didn't need the house in Aspen, that Rachel and I could take care of Mia ourselves. But she just laughed and replied, if you refuse, that means you're admitting your parents were right. You're admitting Mia doesn't deserve it. Hearing her say that, I went silent. And I accepted. Grandma still video calls with Mia every week. The 2 of them talk for hours. She tells stories from the old days and teaches Mia to bake through the phone screen. Those are the moments she looks forward to most. I don't hope for much. I hope Grandma stays healthy, so we can meet when spring comes and walk together in Garden of the Gods Park, as she promised. So when summer comes, Mia can stay at her house for a few weeks, learn to bake apple pie from the family recipe. And today, another winter. Almost a year after that fateful Christmas night with no contact, I sent the DNA test results to my parents' house. Not to prove anything. However, I want to let them know that Mia is my biological daughter, as the paper clearly states 99.99% of the time. But more importantly, I wanted them to understand, happiness isn't found in that piece of paper. My story ends here. If the story taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes strangers love us more than our own blood relatives. And blood is never the only thing that defines family. But before I close, I want to ask you, if you were me, what would you do when your own parents humiliate your daughter in front of the whole family? Could you forgive them? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support me and give me motivation to share more stories. Thank you for listening. See you again.